imagines to the end that he is free. We think the end of the gospel story is resurrection, but that's our ending to the story. Jesus' period at the end of his public ministry, at least in the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke, is the story we just read or heard. And I guess there's actually a better and more honest way to say that, which is in each of those Gospels, the editor or the storyteller chose to make the destruction of the temple the last story Jesus told publicly. Now we know that Jesus did not write or dictate the Gospels. Mark, Luke, and Matthew did. And for some reason, the story of Jesus talking about the temple and apocalypse was the last public story they told about. They had Jesus tell. All three of those Gospels. Now, don't get confused here, because there were numerous stories about Jesus told in the last chapters of those Gospels. But for whatever reason, this was the last public story told by Jesus. Now, I'm sure I've mentioned this before when we're leaking out of the last weeks of the season of Pentecost and the Revised Common Lectionary, which also tells these tales. But I find it curious in each of the Synoptic Gospels that they end with the destruction of the temple. Now, it's a prelude, as Jesus tells it, about the end of time, and it's a pretty doggone dark story, as he tells it. In all three Gospels, the last story Jesus tells is provoked by some knucklehead oogling at the temple and exclaiming, "Oh, how beautiful it is." And there's something about someone marveling at a human achievement like the temple that just sends Jesus into his darkened depths to forecast what's going to happen at the end of time when God runs out of patience and human beings run out of options. And we imagine to the end that we are free. Jesus was living close to his end, and he knew it, and he knew that his compatriots were living close to their end too. And I'm guessing it was a terrible grief that plagued his thoughts and filled his heart with sorrow. So when someone flutters like a puppy and wags emotively with naive awe about the beauty of the stained glass and the majesty of the roof beams and how great the organ sounded, Jesus gets morose. You know, I've had many people write to me in response to a column or a post, or just because they wrongly expect me to have some wise response about the results of this past election, I mean. I'm not going to delve into the politics of it because that's not, at least normally, my preaching task. But these visions of an apocalypse I have received, they fit in well with this morning's story. I have a good friend, for example, battling cancer, who texted me out of nowhere that she didn't think she could survive another term under the president-elect. It is because she associates January 6th with her initial diagnosis brought on by the toxic emotions of all that preceded it for her. Another friend who is queer and who has children DM'd me a stream of consciousness litany of angry, fearful, passionate feelings and thoughts about what she feared and courses of action she wanted to take. A Finger Lakes physician, who I do not even know, sent a troubled email about what he saw as the darkness ahead and the lunacy of some of his family and friends. Now, honestly, I have suspended my grief and worry, just like I do when I'm responding to a family whose loved one has died and who I cared about also, and whose funeral I will conduct. I have bracketed my grief in order to respond to others, but also because the words of T.S. Eliot are steeped into my veins for times such as this. He wrote, I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope. For hope would be hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love. For love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the hope and love, the faith and the love and the hope are all in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not ready for thought. So the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing. What I take that to mean is what I think Jesus was saying to his friends. All of us need to look into the eyes of death. All of us need to look in the eyes of death in order to live. I think that is what he was saying. Not only is the temple going to be torn asunder, but so too the earth. Our own sun will explode and be gone. Every star whose light we see at night is already dead. The truth is that every one of us is terminal. And so is every living, breathing, fiery thing in the cosmos. For some reason, that's how God created us. Terminal. We need to look that in the face and get square with it. And he imagines to the end that he is free. We are not free. There is a sticky spider silk webbing we cannot cut ourselves away from that is connecting us to one another and to every living thing on earth. We need to look that in the eyes and get square with it. You see, in Mark's story, I think Peter, James, and John are asking, tell us what to look out for so we can get ready. Jesus' response sounds like an answer, but it's not an answer. Many will come in my name, he says, and say, I am he. And they will lead many astray. And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places, and there will be famines, but this is but the beginning. From today's gospel. Well, when have there not been famines? When have there not been wars? When have nations not risen up against other nations? When haven't there been false prophets? In other words, he might as well have said, you're already in it, guys, and you have always been in it. Deal with it. Now, I recognize this is not a wise political message. This is not a kind and merciful pastoral response. That's not what anyone wants to hear. But it is good theology because it is God's honest truth, stripped to its nakedness and in a strange way, beautiful essence. We are not free, we never were. We're going to die, we always have been. We're going to have to confront evil over and over and over and over and over again. No matter how many times we think we have defeated it, we're going to have to struggle against it again because it exists and it always did and always will. And what else? We are also part of the evil. At least we're part of it part of the time, and we always have been and we always will be. That's the darkness in which there is also the dancing. When we are overwhelmed by these truths that we live in and among, but do not always face, it can be debilitating and overwhelming or even incapacitating. There's only one thing I know to do when facing the depth and the breadth and the presence of any such darkness. The economy of evil is a network and a milieu in which all of us work and live and play. It exists in contrast to the economy of God. And as I've noted before, in the economy of God, all currency is small change rather than big fortunes. In fact, there are no Elon Musks in the economy of God, nor George Soros or any other billionaire. Only people with small change, exchanging it and sharing it to build common wealth. The economy of God operates on the principle of small love and the powerful influence of accumulated acts of small love. Love over a lifetime, one small love after another. There are, of course, opportunities for big love, but they're rare and usually high risk. We can respond and participate in them when they come along, but they come along only when we have banked a fortune of small loves throughout our lifetimes. And by small love, I mean stuff like buying lunch for a beggar, or bringing a canned food to put in the basket at church, writing a get well card or a note of encouragement to someone, or taking them some food and doing some yard work for them if they need it, giving money to charities and volunteering time, even if it seems like too small and insignificant of a thing ever to do any permanent lasting good, recycling cans and glass and paper and giving clothing to Goodwill, rolling down the window and handing a $5 bill to the guy with the sign sitting in the median, or stopping to talk with someone who looks like they could use a friendly gesture, voting for candidates who are concerned about justice for the disenfranchised rather than power for us, changing our lifestyles in small ways to reduce the size of our carbon footprint, a small act of love with those who follow us in mind. Taking time to make a human connection with the bank teller or waitress or panhandler or person behind the meat counter. All of that is small love too. Small love adds up. It adds up over time, and like compound interest, accumulates even though we aren't watching it, and then suddenly it's big and begins to move. But we can never stop. We can never stop contributing our puny acts of small love. No matter how old and decrepit we get, or how limited and marginalized we become, we can never stop. So in the face of uncertainty and what we perceive to be darkness and even apocalypse, we need to create a strategy. We need a plan to make and multiply our acts of small love. We don't get good at it by accident. We need to keep adding them and keep contributing them and keep doing them. We need a personal and intentional plan for how to keep adding our small part to the jackpot of shared wealth that is the economy of God. I'm not talking just about the election here. Whether our darkness is a personal depression or a health crisis, a family sorrow or grief, a national catastrophe. The only response I know that is empowering as well as hopeful is to name and to declare and to own a personal mission. A personal mission to create and contribute small acts of love. How am I going to invigorate and add to my personal contributions? Whether small, discreet, and anonymous, or done in solidarity with others, what small acts of love am I going to do? When we reach those moments in which we must wait without hope because we do not know what to hope for, or wait without faith because we're no longer sure what to believe in, then it's time to get creative. It's time to set a mission for how and where and with whom we are going to keep banking small acts of love in the economy of God. It's time to look down at that temple, knowing it's going to be a wreck, and knowing that the apocalypse may be at hand, but doing our small acts of love anyway. Now that is freedom. Thanks for being here, and peace be with you.